Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Um, so, to do a conversation about politics before the election is a little risky sometimes if you think about it. But the topic that the way I'm going to present it is really coming from a place of trying to heal our country and heal our community in sense of depolarizing what has become extremely polarized. So, but just to start off, the election's in 5 days, is that right? And there's a lot of emotion, a lot of both hope and hopelessness, and a lot of acrimony and fear. And, we're feeling it, I think, as Americans and as Jews. We feel it with the changes in conversations, like some of you are saying, between family and friends. And sometimes we're choosing, silence and non-engagement, while also harboring a little quiet alarm in our hearts for what we think the other side is doing wrong, or a relative or a friend is doing wrong with their vote. And of course, I think we're also thinking about the polarization in the Jewish community. During my lifetime, there was never a time when I was worried about both parties somehow fighting against anti-Semitism or being somehow for Israel. And now I'm in a place of, wow, and many of us are looking at like, wow, the extremes of both parties are really becoming very mainstream, and it's starting to make us all just a lot more uncomfortable. So I want to just start with a caveat, which is I'm not a policy person or a politics expert. I'm coming at this from my own expertise, which is from couples therapy. And of course, politics has completely invaded the therapy office. I've been seeing lots of couples where they have very strongly divergent points of view on the political spectrum, and it's gotten stronger and stronger over the last 4 years. And it's especially painful when I have a Jewish couple that comes in, and I can hear just the same arguments that all of us are thinking about across the divide. So, so what I thought I would do is actually start not with the politics part of it, but start with a personal situation of not personal to me and Hal, but personal fight that a lot of couples get into in terms and how it gets polarized. To just use an example, like straight up couples therapy, polarized fights. How do I think about them? How do they get worse? How do they get better? And then see if I want you to be like thinking through the lens of couples therapy, what would that look like in terms of the American scene and the Jewish community polarization? So, so I'm going to start with the kind of fight that I'm talking about first is going to be one that usually shows up in a polarized way, and that is a fight about money. So let me share a screen. This is a couple who is fighting about money. One person looks like they're an easy spender, and the other person looks like they're a very sharp saver. And when they describe one another, they talk about each other in really nasty or difficult ways. Like, so, don't be a cheapskate. We got to enjoy things. You got to splurge sometimes. Why are you being so penny pinching? And he similarly will say something like, don't be wasteful. It's kind of selfish to spend on yourself. It's better to save, be cautious. Let's spend on what we need and not on what we want. And at some point, with most couples that I work with who have this particular fight, it didn't used to be that bad. So they'll describe it moving from the beginning of the relationship. Like at the beginning, it was like, okay, we had little bits of arguments. So, hey, let's go for that purchase we want to make, but no, maybe we'll save. A little bit of a back and forth when they first got together, but then they start to move to the extremes. Come on, you only live once. Let's go to this concert. It'll be fun. No, it's just too much money. We have to save for our future. And they start to move, and they may even get into a spot that looks like this, which is a much more extreme situation. I'll pay cash. He won't know about it, or I'll set aside some money in a separate account so she can't get to it. This is when it starts to get pretty polarized. And what causes it to get so polarized is that they're terrifying each other. of course. You know, the more that I feel deprived and feel under control by my partner who's like being tight-fisted, the more I might fight for enjoyment and say, no, we have to spend more. And the more I might spend more, the more my partner would then feel, uh-oh, the money's running out. I need more security. And so this fight gets circular and gets amplified. So the more one is pushing, the more they scare each other, the more they move to the poles. That's kind of what's happening. And when they get to the state of being like at the extremes, it looks like the fight is about spending versus saving. But I like to say the solution is we got to move away from thinking that the fight is about spending and saving. You know, and I say, you're waving the flag for spending, you're waving the flag for saving. But in fact, the argument is about something different. It's not the issue that's at the surface, it's the values that are underneath it. So when I ask, like, what's really going on for you when you want to be spending, I'll ask this hypothetical woman, and she'll say, I'm fighting for freedom. It's like he controls everything I do, and I'm fighting to just live my life. And if I ask him, what are you fighting for? He'll say, she's terrifying me that we won't have the financial security that we need, and I'm fighting for our security. That's what I want. That's what'll make me feel comfortable if I know we're secure in our finances. And she's saying, what makes me feel comfortable is to know that life, you get one turn at this. And what makes me feel comfortable is to know that I have some freedom in my life. When I help them identify what the underlying values are, then I start talking about how they can be jointly held. So I might turn to her and say, I know you don't believe you shouldn't have financial security. And she almost always will say, of course, like, I want financial security, but to a point. And then I'll turn to him and I'll say, you don't want no freedom and no spending and no fun. And he'll say, yeah, of course not, but to a point. And then we're talking about an issue of balancing values. We're no longer talking about right and wrong and, you know, terrible morals and, you know, you're evil for doing what you're doing. We're instead saying two reasonable people are fighting for values that feel important to both. They've just gotten polarized on which value is more important to them right now. And then we can come back from polarization, because I say instead of holding two separate flags that we're, you know, only waving for one, we get under one banner and we say every discussion about money has to be about both security and freedom. So what they're saying to each other in this is, how can we get both the joy of financial security and the joy of some spending freedom from our decisions about money? So now if we're planning a vacation, we have to do it in a way that says, how do we hold on to some security and hold on to freedom? If we're planning to pay off our debt, to what degree do we talk about freedom and security in both? All right, so that's the money fight. That's typically that's the path I take a couple down when I'm trying to pull them back from polarization. One more example. Parents fight about their differences quite a bit. Sometimes the fight looks like this, where one parent is saying, you know, I'm concerned about safety, and the other one is too risk-taking. And the other parent is saying, we never have any fun because my partner is always so concerned about safety. Sometimes, and it can get extreme. The more, in this case, the woman starts to feel like, oh my God, he's doing risk-taking stuff. I have to protect us. So then she gets more security, you know, safety oriented. The more over safety oriented he feels she's getting, the more he pulls out and says, we need to do things that are, you know, the kids have to have some fun, like let them out of jail, you know, let them have some enjoyment. So, you know, it also can take the form of fighting about how strict to be with kids. So one parent might be saying we need to, you know, be more disciplined about them. And the other parent is saying, no, we have to have some compassion about, you know, they couldn't finish the paper in time. We should have some compassion for that and say it's all right, not such a big deal. Again, if you pull out the values that are under it and you say, what do you want your children actually to learn? Is there a lesson? Do you have to be so unified in the approach? Or can your children learn that there's one parent that they love that seems to feel that leniency is good, and then there's another parent they love who really wants them to be very disciplined? And might children turn out with two loving parents who have slightly different viewpoints, learning that you need a balance in your life of discipline and also leniency and self-compassion? So when I think about our politics, for years, I've been thinking that it feels like a custody battle. You know, sometimes as a couples therapist, I'm called in by a divorcing couple, and they're saying, like, this has gotten out of hand. We just need to lower the temperature. We're starting to really criticize each other, and it's getting tough. And then once they get into the conversation, it looks like this: I'm the better parent. I want what's best for my children, but I'm the better parent. No, I'm the better parent. I want what's best for our children, but I know how to do it. He's doing it wrong. She's doing it wrong. And I have felt like the American scene, even before, these last several years where it's gotten even more polarized, I have felt like, we're the kids here and the politicians are like the parents in this terrible custody battle. And they're saying, Democrats are saying we have the better solution. The Republicans are saying, no, we have the better solution. And the battle is actually harming us kids, us American citizens, more than if they didn't fight so darn much. So in my own personal feelings about what's been happening in politics is like polarization is the problem. We can feel like one party or the other has the better solution, but ultimately, if we stay in a polarized state, I think about it when it comes to couples. If we stay in a polarized state, we find that, over time in a couple, if you can't get out of your polarized state, then you end up getting to a point of no return. You get to a place where you're building up so much animosity and so much frustration with each other that you can't find your way back to seeing the good in the other person. Like contempt builds up, like you're such a spender, it's so horrible, you're so terrible with the kids, the contempt builds up, and then where do you go? So to me, the polarizing state goes only one direction unless there's effort to depolarize. You can't, if you keep going that direction, it ends. And that's what's scary to me about what's happening in America now. Some of you know that I am involved in an organization called Braver Angels. It was originally called Better Angels. And the idea of it comes from a quote from Lincoln. We have the few history experts on the call, but it comes from a speech made that Lincoln made, asking Americans to summon the better angels of our nature, to find the courage needed to build a more perfect union with malice towards none, with charity for all, and with firmness in the right. So the organization was originally called Better Angels. It's now called Braver Angels, with the sense that there's more courage that we need now in order to depolarize. That the whole purpose of the organization is to depolarize America. That's the objective. And I want to just show you a graphic from the organization's website that talks about just how bad things are now. Okay, so basically there's a growing animosity towards between the two political parties. If you look between 1994, hold on, let me go back there, between 1994 and 2016, just like this spike in a statement, Democrats are very unfavorable or Republicans are very unfavorable, held by the other party. If you look at over time, this is between 1994 and 2014, the median Republican and the median Democrat have moved to the polls, becoming either more consistently liberal in their positions on more issues or more consistently conservative in their opinion on issues. And of course, we also know that there's less acceptance over the same period from 1960 to now or at least till 2016 when this study was done, less acceptance of political diversity in marriages by parents. So how much do you agree with the statement, I would be displeased if my child married someone of the opposing political party? And that's been rising. The stakes are really high when you think about what's going on in our country right now. And what I've been actually really delighted to see in my growing connection to Braver Angels is how many couples therapists are in the organization. It's kind of funny. I meet someone new in the organization. They're like, so I'm a couples therapist. I'm like, another one? And I think it has something to do with this sense that what we're doing in our daily practice is trying to bring people back from the polls and find negotiated solutions for difficult problems. And so it's quite appealing when you think about the American problem. What can we do about it? I'm just going to share another graphic that comes from Braver Angels. So when you ask people, what is my overall emotional attitude towards the majority of people who support the other side? The most polarized is hatred, disdain, pity. And we want to move it over to basic respect and appreciation. So if you view the other side as their enemies and they want to harm the country, you're at the worst poles of polarization. When you come to they're deplorable and they're ignorant and they should know better, pretty bad too. That's disdain. We're in better shape if we at least come to pity. And I've often thought, sometimes when I'm talking to people, when they get polarized about difficult relatives in couples therapy, I say, better to have pity than contempt. Just, can you say about that relative, I feel bad for them. They're so difficult. So yeah, if we can think about the other side with pity, we're already in a better spot. They've been duped. They're well-meaning, but they've been fooled. And if we can come to this spot of basic respect, they have something to contribute. They have some valid points, though their overall perspective is flawed. We're moving even more. And the most depolarized state is to say the other side has something to contribute. They have an important perspective, even if I only agree with parts of it. And one of the most important things that I'll share about Braver Angels is there's no interest in persuading anyone. That's one of the basic concepts in this organization. No one is there to persuade anyone else to change their opinion. The idea is to be able to disagree without being disagreeable. To be able to say, our politics don't have to be demonizing. They don't have to bring out the worst in us. They don't have to destroy goodwill. We don't have to dehumanize each other in the process of arguing about our differences. We shouldn't normalize polarization. And we could be quite divergent on issues, but if it comes down to how we feel about each other, as in that, kind of disturbing rainbow I just showed you, that then we're only headed towards contempt. The more we go towards the left of that bridge, the more we go towards seeing each other as enemies. What are our options? When we get to that level of contempt for one another or simply hatred, where does that leave us? So I'm going to do my little plug here for Braver Angels. So apologies, because it's just, I've just really gotten quite involved. And I will say, there are a lot of people in that organization who are currently working on campaigns to elect their favorite candidate, both sides. And yet we're also working on depolarization. The idea, kind of like a prevailing idea is, love your country by showing concern for your fellow citizens, no matter what their political orientation. So I'll just say a few of the things we do in Braver Angels. We run workshops where you get people who are it's always called leaning red or leaning blue. Get people who are leaning red and leaning blue to sit together in a room, disagree respectfully, talk about their points of view, root their point of view in their personal experience. So you're seeing each other as humans, We have workshops where we're actively working on one issue and noticing all the places of common ground. So like on an issue like immigration, what do we agree about? What are the values we agree about? What are the concerns we are disturbed by? And what are the policies that we could actually find, that we could both agree to, both sides? And you have a team of reds, a team of blue sitting and hashing out ideas and then comparing their lists and saying, you know, I actually could agree with that, but I can't agree with that one, and finding the places of common ground. It's a citizen organization, by the way. There's no politicians in this organization. So you know, sometimes people say, hey, we should put up a candidate. And then other people are like, no, we're not going there. This is a citizens organization with the idea of citizens will depolarize, and then our politicians will be forced to see that that's where people want to go and will represent us that way. So we're trying to see each other as humans and not stereotypes. And in order to do that, we also are asking each other to depolarize within. Okay, so there's another workshop that was just created, which says like the first step to depolarizing anyone else is to depolarize yourself. And what does that actually mean? So this is what it means. It means looking inside of yourself and asking these hard questions. And I ask myself these hard questions, and unfortunately, sometimes my answer is yes, and it shouldn't be. How often do I find myself thinking about those people on the other side without much regard for the variation among them? We know there's variation in our own group, but how much do we actually say there's variation there? How often do I assign mainly self-serving or negative motives to the other group and positive motives to my group? How often do I focus on the extreme members of your group, the outrageous ideas of your group, and then take the next logical step, which is to say, and therefore no reasonable person could remain in that group? That's a demonizing process. If I say I look only at the most extreme. If I compare the worst people on the other side with the best people on my side, I got to ask myself that question. Is that what I'm doing? And do I feel a rush of pleasure when I'm sitting with friends where we can ridicule those crazies on the other side? This is where I often say that couples who are the same in orientation will have a harder time depolarizing than those who are actually forced to ask the question, how can I love this person and have such divergent views? If I love this person, I can't think of them as a crazy. And therefore, a part of me has to say, not everyone on that side is crazy, because my partner isn't. So in some ways, you know, people who I often feel really sorry for people who are in politically divergent marriages, but I also feel like they're working every day to depolarize, in a sense, to kind of try to think differently so that they're not always feeling tortured in their relationship. So now I want to get to the Jewish community, and then we'll open it up to thoughts and discussion. Okay, so then I think about the Jewish community. And the longer that I'm in Braver Angels, all I keep thinking about is we got to do this for Jews. Because I think about it, like what's happening to us as a result of the polarization in the country. Now our schools and our shuls and our families are getting polarized. Now we're not thinking about each other with compassion. You know, we're starting to stereotype one another. You know, if we're honest, the most polarized sides of both parties are bad for us. And when we get involved in discussion where we're asking like, oh, it's worse, the extreme left is worse, the extreme right is worse, that whole conversation for us Jews is like, why do we even want an answer to that? Maybe we don't even want an answer, which is worse. The extremes are bad for us. And, you know, sure, when we think about the extremes, it helps us decide, well, because of that extreme, I have to vote this way, or because of that extreme, I want to vote the other way. But when the voting is over, what do we want for our community? Do we want to be so infected by polarization that, you know, we are either choosing between being Israel supporting or anti, you know, neo-Nazis? Like, how do we show up in a way where politicians are vying for our votes by being both Israel supporting and anti-white supremacists. What gives us most security as American Jews? Is it best to be polarized with the Democrats, polarized with the Republicans, or working on depolarizing both? If we could, this is my feeling, and I'll just put out my soapbox about it, and then I really want to hear what other people think. If we're working on actively depolarizing our own community, it's only going to be better for us, right? If we kind of fall into, no, we have to just fight as hard as we can for only one party, it doesn't seem like it's going to be as good. So I want to put it out for discussion. I'm going to just, we can have people unmute. I think we have a small enough group here that you can unmute yourself. And I'm curious about, like, first of all, your general reactions to this whole way of thinking about things. I'm going to just share one more tool that I think is helpful to think about in terms of the Jewish community. This comes from a Braver Angels workshop on how you actually depolarize yourself. These are practices, what you can do to depolarize yourself. So challenge your own stereotypes. If you have a stereotype of the other side, ask yourself, what's really not true about that stereotype? Maybe there's a nugget of truth in it, but does everyone fit that stereotype, or can I see people as human? Make some depolarizing distinctions. There are differences between people's positions and who they are. There are differences between people's policies that they support and their core values. If I don't like the policy, but I understand the value that's underneath it, I can care about that person who's on the other side. I can, often we hold inconsistent views on our own side, and we look at the other side and we call that hypocrisy. But if you can say, I've got this, I'm voting for this person on this side, but I kind of agree with this and I don't agree with that. Let's call it an inconsistency and a troubling dilemma that we have, as opposed to hypocrisy. Avoid using labels that are pejorative or dumping everyone into the same bucket. They all think this. Criticize the idea or a policy, but not the motives of people who hold the idea. Spend some energy criticizing your own side. Point that out to, like, this is one of the things I'm uncomfortable with on my own side, and then say something positive about the other side. This is what, in some of the workshops that we do in Braver Angels about how to talk to family members, there's actually a whole skills workshop about how to talk to family members. These are some of the exercises we do, where you're like, okay, find something you can say that's positive about the other side, and find something that you can criticize about your own side. And what it does is it opens up some space in the conversation, because the other person hears you say, yeah, I kind of think that too. I'm like a little bit uncomfortable with that. Yeah, it's really nice to hear you say that, because I feel that way as well. And that brings us a little bit closer.